Hello, listeners. Kathy Lawless, Life Story Curator, bringing you the podcast series, How Did I Get Here? A series of interviews designed for people just starting out in their careers, people in transition, or possibly feeling stuck, and giving them access to the stories of people who have been there, done that, so that they might be inspired with some new ideas. Or maybe just comforted knowing they are not alone, that everybody starts somewhere, and everybody goes through times of transition and times when they feel stuck. Today, I am excited to be interviewing my friend Tamara Alexander-Johnson. Welcome, Tamara.
Thank you.
And Tamara and I actually worked together for, I guess it was only about 2 or 3 years, but I think our friendship and our, staying connected lasted a lot longer than the time that we actually worked together. But
yes, it has.
And Tamara is a commercial corporate real estate leader, and she's currently in transition and looking for that next opportunity. So we'll call her a free agent. So Tamara, before we get into what it means to be in that corporate real estate space, I always like to start with the icebreaker questions so that folks can learn a little bit about you before they learn about how did I get here? So in terms of the icebreaker questions, why don't you tell us where you grew up, what part of the country, how many siblings are in your family, where you were in the birth order, and how you think all of those things kind of played into who you are today.
Well, thank you, Kathy. I actually grew up just north of Denver in Longmont, Colorado. So it's technically a suburb of Metro Denver, but mainly an agricultural community, a bedroom community to Boulder as well. I am the second of 4 children, second oldest, and I have 2 brothers and 1 sister. We all grew up in the Longmont and then moved to Greeley area. My father was a cattle rancher, and he and his partner owned 2 very large herds, one Angus cattle and then one of Hereford cattle. So I had the opportunity growing up, along with my older brother, to be involved in that agricultural world. I showed horses all through high school. He showed cattle. I was very much involved in the 4-H sports, because that was before I moved to the suburbs, and our children had the real planned recreational sports that they have now.
Yeah.
I think what's been so interesting is, I love Colorado. I've moved away a couple of different occasions and come back, and this is home, and it's such a beautiful environment to be in, as well as to look up at the mountains every day and just gain some inspiration from their beauty.
Yeah. I'm a Colorado native as well, and I haven't moved out of the state, but traveled for business, and I just kind of assumed everything was like it was here until you do that traveling. You're like, oh, we've got it pretty good here. So
Yes, I would agree.
yeah. So you're out on the ranch. Did you, when you said you showed horses, did you actually work on the ranch too? I mean, did you ride horses on the ranch to actually, herd the cattle? And
Oh, there were a couple of times that, yes, my father let me help move some cattle. For the most part, he never wanted me to get hurt. And we had several ranch hands that worked on the properties for us. He did put my older work, which probably was good for him because he was quite ornery and I think needed to stay busy. But I was able to, concentrate on showing my horses. I showed Western Performance, and I showed some Arabian stallions at Halter. So it was just, a wonderful way to grow up. You were still an hour and a half from Denver. Back then, remember, the speed limit was at 55 for so many years. And, now you could hop on the interstate and, if there isn't traffic, you can be in Denver from, Greeley or Longmont, within half an hour,
yeah,
40 minutes.
yeah, but it seemed longer back then, didn't it?
Right. And
So
then go ahead.
I would say, what other activities did you participate in, or was it mainly horses?
It was the horses. I did play softball. It was, as I said, with the 4-H. We had a girls softball league and played that for a couple of years, probably 12 and 13. And then I really got involved with my horses. And, that took up all summer.
Yeah.
Because the big event for us was to show at the Greeley Stampede, which was always right around the 4th of July. And I wanted to compete at a level that would take me to the Colorado State Fair in Pueblo. That's always the end of August. But my father didn't want to invest in that expensive a horse.
Ah,
So I did well, but I went as far as I could go, of course, without really investing some money in a much much more expensive horse, a thoroughbred actually, or a registered horse.
yeah. So it takes a kind of a special horse as well as a special person like yourself then to be on top of the horse or showing the horse.
Right, right.
Yeah. Well,
So
shifting gears a little bit there, when you look at a fun meter on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the couch potato and 5 being the life of the party, where do you put yourself?
I'm pretty much right up there at the top, an 8 or 9. You know,
You're not even a
I'm
5.
yeah, I'm very outgoing. I love to meet new people. I like to go to party environments where, there's some pomp and circumstance. You get a chance to dress up and, have your hair done and nails and I'm always quick to try to find people that I don't know and either introduce myself to them or have someone introduce me to them. Because I think that's the part of it. You need to get out as much as you can and meet new people and experience new things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it sounds maybe like you're a bit of a risk taker then. Where do you put yourself on the risk taking scale? 1 being low and 5 being high risk taker.
I'm probably about a 7. Did you say 5 or 10 is higher?
I said
Or
5, but that's
okay,
okay.
okay. So put me a 4. Put me a 4. I was thinking in my head 1 to 10. Um, yeah, I mean, I will, I guess, step out of my comfort zone and I'll do something that maybe is not risky, but just not what I would see myself doing because I feel there are times I just need to push myself out of, especially if I'm in a circumstance where, I feel like I'm not as happy as I could be, or I'm not doing as much as I could be to give back. So I think 4 is probably a pretty good number for me.
Good number for you. Okay. Okay. Well, before we get into your whole story of how did I get here, why don't you tell us a little bit about what it means to be a leader in that commercial corporate real estate space?
Well, in particular, I started the career, about 25 years ago, working with some developers here in Denver in the Front Range, and we were buying, distressed properties. That was that first venture into the world where I was new in the business world, and we had the savings and loan crisis, and then we had several of the commercial property owners lose their properties in foreclosure for whatever the reasons were. Either they over leveraged or couldn't lease the properties enough. And I had the chance to work with a couple of really sharp gentlemen that brought me in to help find these properties for us to purchase. And they were all along the Front Range, a good 5 years there. And it helped me to learn not only my negotiation skills, but all the different asset types and what to look for from the investor's perspective. And that kind of led me into doing more negotiations or even development with some other national REITs, the real estate investment trusts. And
Oh,
then about 10
mhm.
years ago, I had the opportunity to interview at Western Union. And I'd never worked on a global level at all. I'd worked nationally, but somewhat limited. And this was a role in their real estate team to work on global transactions. And over the period of about 7.5 years, I had the chance to move up within the organization, do quite a bit of transactions, train some other people to do transactions as well. And then I got involved with more of the leadership to be more strategic advisor to them and really not just be reactionary and take care of leases that were expiring, but to really say, okay, our portfolio as a whole is, say it's 3 million square feet. Do we need to be in all the places that we're in? And can we lower our costs at all? Or should we grow in some areas and not in others? And that prompted me to go on with my education to receive a master's of corporate real estate designation with a organization called Coronet Global, and it's the largest real estate organization in the world, commercial real estate organization. And Western Union paid for most of it, which was wonderful. I gave back to the company with my strategic advice and leadership skills. And then I, of course, earned this designation. And the situation changed that the corporate real estate team was basically outsourced to Western Union. But the last couple of years, I've gone on to work with other corporations such as VF Corp and BBVA Bank, which is a Spanish bank, and help them strategize for their real estate portfolio, whatever it would be, office, industrial, retail, distribution centers, or even new developments. And it's given me the opportunity to lead teams to do the project management construction, the um, change management when you're taking your employees, from a closed-in environment to more the open collaborative environment, which was the rule of thumb for the last 5 years. And of course, that's changing now with COVID, and we're going back the opposite way, and we'll be doing the
Yeah.
de-densification where there'll be fewer people in the offices, but how do we design that to be effective, but still give people a comfort level and help them feel healthy? And so I have the advantage of being at that point as a leader to holistically see the entire environment and figure out what are the best ways to manage the facilities? How do we handle our lease repository system? How do we negotiate the leases that are best for the business units that give them the most flexibility if the market changes and they need to downsize, or even they need to sell their asset? How do they go about doing that? So that's how I've kind of honed my skills probably the last 10, 11 years.
Yeah, it sounds like you've been on so many sides of the corporate real estate, like the transaction side, but also the strategy side, and then everything in between. So, wow, that's quite
Yes.
a vast breadth and depth of knowledge then in that space.
Thank you.
Awesome. So, Tamara, I have to ask. So, back when you were showing horses back in Greeley and on the ranch, what did you want to be when you grew up? Did you anticipate that you wanted to be in the real estate market?
No, I actually started school at CU Boulder and wanted to go on to be a pediatrician.
Oh, medical
And
field.
that was just my dream somehow to, get through undergrad and then go on to medical school. And so real estate never even entered my mind. I'd have to be quite honest. But, life changes and things, move in different directions and other opportunities come together. So yes, I ended up in real estate.
Well, that's what we need to figure out is, well, how did I get here? So you started at CU Boulder. You're thinking pediatrician. Did you, did you start into medical degree then at some point, or give us
No, no, I was just doing my undergrad, my first year college. And I actually met my first husband there, who was a senior and I was a freshman. And we married the following Thanksgiving. And then he was busy building up his business. He had an electrical sign business, and I was helping him. And, you know, my parents and I have to respect their decision, said, "You're married now, we're not going to pay for your college education." And so I didn't really continue pursuing it at that point until actually my husband got sick and died of cancer. And within a couple years of his death, I really started to think about, okay, now it's my turn. What do I want to do? And I knew, number one, I wanted to go back and finish my bachelor's degree. And then secondly, that's when somehow the bug hit me that I said, I'm going to get my real estate license and I'm going to learn the commercial real estate business. And that's how the path proceeded along in that direction.
Wow. So you finished your degree, and while you then got your license?
No, I got my brokerage license first and started working for one of the local developers that I said had owned some property, leasing the properties for them. And then I went back to school, the program at DU, the women's college, where I could work full time and go to school, finish my degree. And I did that in 4 years. It was quite strenuous, but it was fun. I mean, I enjoyed doing it. It's just that I was glad when I was finished.
Yeah. Well, I have to, give props to the women's college. I graduated from there too, but it took me 6 years. So
Mm.
props to you for doing it in 4. So, what kind of prompted you to get your commercial real estate broker's license then? I mean, had you had a family member, or maybe, I mean, did you have a mentor or somebody who made that suggestion?
No, I had just had an interest in real estate. I, had looked at different opportunities, in the business world. Actually, my very first job when I was married to my husband and before he started his business, I worked at a bank in downtown Denver. It was Metro State Bank, which I know has been closed for many years. And I liked the banking industry, but I knew that I just didn't want to continue with that. And I would walk around in downtown Denver, and of course, it was much smaller than it is now. And, I'd look at the office buildings and I would just think, about the people working in them and, how do you build a building? How do these developers pick the site and do it? And it intrigued me, I guess, more than anything.
Hmm.
And there really aren't any lessons when you obtain your real estate license that teach you a lot about the commercial real estate world. It's more about the law of real estate, and then, how to prepare your own closing statement if you, buy and sell. And it's mainly geared towards residential, but it's changing. There are a little more commercial classes. But I just started meeting people that were, and there were very few at the time, women in commercial real estate through various classes. And I started talking to them and asking, how do you get involved in office leasing or retail leasing, whatever it might have been at the time? And do you like doing it? And it kind of just sparked my interest that it was a way to learn about a business and completely different from residential, but still something that was important. And of course, there are very few women in the business. So that kind of intrigued me as well. I kept thinking, well, why aren't there more women?
Yeah. Yeah. Did you ever figure that out? Why there weren't more
Well,
women?
yes. Yeah, for the most part, and it is changing, but there are definitely more women and minorities than there were, say, even 25 years ago. And I think it's just that they either didn't have the education or didn't have anyone as a mentor or sponsor to help them see, hey, there are so many facets of the real estate business from a commercial perspective: property management, architecture, engineering, development, leasing, um, lending, commercial lending, title work. So I think that's one of the reasons why I got involved, with Crew Denver, which is a part of the Crew network. It's also now a global network of real estate women in commercial real estate, but also men. I'd say 25% nationally are men. But that was an avenue to not only have a comrade, an arm, so to speak, women in the industry, but to meet real estate attorneys and to meet those in the title business and hear about their challenges or how they're doing deals and have them introduce me to more people. And then as I, grew and changed with companies, I was able to introduce primarily women, but some young men as well, to key players for them as they were building their career or just trying to look for business.
Yeah. So it sounds like when you're a broker and when you were first starting out, it's really very much kind of a sales role, right? You had to go out and find your own. Were you working more with the tenants, or were you working more with the building owners, or
Well,
both?
yeah, I represented the owner. So yes, we were trying to find tenants for the property. So it did include some cold calling and including, canvassing other buildings just to see who the tenants that were in there and getting to know other brokers that might exclusively represent a tenant to figure out, well, if you were to go to a new building or a new development, what is it the tenant would need? And, ascertain if it was a build to suit opportunity or if it's just a way to get that tenant into the building that I owned, I meaning my ownership, and try to put a deal together that, was a win-win for
Yeah, yeah. And I would assume that
both parties.
as you're in the business longer, then you have more contacts, more relationships, more referrals. It kind of snowballs over time. But in the beginning, it was probably
Right.
pretty hard to get started.
Well, it was. The advantage was at least I represented an owner where I had the product to lease. I just had to find the tenants.
Yeah.
If I'd had neither of them, that would have been much more difficult. And that is a reason why some women weren't getting into it as well. But, I was fortunate to work with a very nice gentleman that brought me into this first company, and they owned industrial and office and some small retail. And he basically kind of trained me in doing the transactions and then introduced me to property management. But I knew I didn't want to go down that particular path. I wanted to stay more on the leasing side.
Yeah. So how did you get aligned with him? Was it someone that you met in your when you were getting licensed or
Yeah, I have to remember. I think it was, and in some ways, it was kind of a tragedy that brought us together. But I think it helped both of us. His daughter was about my age, and I was, what, 27-ish, and she had been kidnapped and murdered, and it was in Arizona. She was going to school there, and it was just very upsetting. And I met him within about 6 months of that period of time, and I think what he saw in me was, and someone had recommended that I just come. That was the day she just picked the phone and called someone and said, "Hi, I would like to learn, the real estate business. I
Mhm.
understand you have some properties to lease. Can I come to work for you?" And he didn't call me back for. I think I must have put in at least 6 or 8 phone calls. And finally, the one time he took my call, he said, "Well, if nothing else, you are the most persistent young woman I've ever met."
Ah,
And I said, "Well, thank you. I'll take that as a compliment." And then when I met him, I could tell that he must have seen something of his daughter in me. I think we looked alike physically, but I think, he saw that she was always determined, and I am too, and hard worker. And I walked out of the office that day with a job,
wow.
and I was with him a good 2.5 years until another opportunity came up. But yeah, and he was not quite a father figure, but very close, almost like an uncle to
Yeah.
me.
Well,
So
so
I think it was good for both of us.
yeah, it sounds like that risk taker in you, just picking up the phone and making that call and then making another call and another call to follow up, all of that then paid off.
Yes, I suppose so when you think about it.
So, the corporate, I'm shifting gears a little bit here. The corporate real estate market, as well as the residential, has had a lot of ebbs and flows. How have you been able to survive in that industry for so long?
And this is my third major, recession, so to speak. 'Cause as I said, in the, late 80s, it started with the savings and loan crisis, and then that went into what, probably 94, that the commercial real estate industry just hit rock bottom. Interest rates were high, and properties weren't filling up, and they were owners and developers were losing the properties. And I was working with a couple of smart gentlemen that we rode that wave and built their portfolio. And then when was it, 2010, we had the other financial crisis where the residential and lending market fell apart. And I actually have been working for a period of time in residential during those years because my daughter had just been born and was little. So kind of gave me the time to spend with her. We got through all of that and started the tenure in corporate real estate, as I said, at Western Union, and then on with VF Corp. And then March hit this year, and now we're in the middle of this pandemic and the financial crisis. And I think what I've learned is that there are cycles in business that if you have planned financially, which I've always tried to do, not that I haven't had, ups and downs that no one planned for, and then just realize that it will get better. It might be hard for the first few months, first couple years, but it's like the ebbs and flows of the tide. It won't always be bad and it won't always be good. So figure out a way to stay the course, be positive, and find ways to communicate with people that feel the same way. Because who wants to talk to or be around someone that's negative? So I always try to make a point to stay in touch with, or either reading their book or meeting them in person or talking on the phone with someone that I think can bring me some positivity and help just keep me focused.
Yeah, I definitely would say that about you, Tamara, as I've now that we've when we were working together and then we both weren't, we were both kind of in transition at the same time. We had the opportunity to kind of lift each other up at different times. So
Yes,
that
which is
positive
important.
is very important. And sometimes, you know, you might be down and I can bring you up, or vice versa. I might be down and you can bring me up. So,
Right,
um, and I do know that as I've been through different times of transition or feeling stuck, it is about interacting with other people. That just, I don't know, just there's something about hearing other people's stories and what they've been through. And you may or may not, you know, do the same thing that they did, but you kind of just go, oh, well, I either maybe don't have it as bad, or, oh, I gotta pick myself up here. There's a
right.
variety of outcomes that come from it. But which
Yes,
is one of the reasons I have been enjoying the podcast, is just hearing how people, navigate their careers. And there are the ups and downs, and sometimes it's not even, within your control, right? When the economy, when there's a recession, when there's a pandemic,
right.
then it's like, well, how does that, change the dynamic? Obviously, commercial real estate right now is pretty vacant, right? I mean, are we going to be in for quite the oversupply?
Well, it's interesting. The industrial market is doing fantastically well because of the e-commerce and needing distribution centers and warehouses for these products. And multifamily, which are the apartments, is doing pretty well. I mean, obviously, there are problems with people not paying their rent, and the landlords have to just work through it. But you're right, office and retail and hotels have just been hit significantly hard. But as I've been reading and been participating in some webinars of those in the industry that are, development professionals as well as architects and engineers, they're all seeing this as an opportunity to redevelop some of these underutilized assets in office or shopping centers or older apartment buildings that maybe they can be converted to affordable housing, to co-work living type of space. So people will have an opportunity to have something to live in that gives them not only their comfort level, but it'll give a return to the investor that it's going to be well worth their time to bring that kind of product to the market. I mean, not
Yeah,
everyone can lease space in Republic Plaza, downtown Denver, but it doesn't mean that there aren't other businesses that could use a smaller, single story walk up building, and maybe that would be a work life play type of environment. And certainly those old hotels could be converted into low income housing. And we certainly need affordable housing everywhere across the country. So I think it's just everyone coming to the mindset, lenders, developers, cities and counties that provide the entitlements for these developments to occur, that we need to change some of these uses for the better, not just because it's always been an office building or a retail center. Do you see what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah. So it sounds like there's going to be maybe a real innovative spark that comes out of the pandemic.
Yes. Yeah,
And
that's what I think is going to happen. I mean, there will be hotels and restaurants and retail centers that just fail because there were too many of them. But that's okay. That's sometimes a natural attrition of business, but it doesn't mean those assets can't be repurposed. And we
yeah,
need those entrepreneurial people to step up and say, City and County Denver, if you give me a break on the purchase of this land, I'll make it 30%, for low income housing, the rest affordable housing, something along those lines.
yeah. Well, and it's great that that it's a repurposing that's functional but served, and that's also, I think, maybe the sign of the times. It serves multiple stakeholders and maybe solves certain problems, like you're saying, the affordable housing, which doesn't exist today, especially in some of those urban areas. Uh,
Right.
so, wow, very cool.
Yeah, that's a silver lining. And I've been glad to hear a lot of different people in the industry bring this up. So that means that they're greater minds than mine putting it, into play.
Yeah, but it also sounds like you get to be a part of it, which with your strategy and your experience, that something you can definitely contribute to.
Well, I would hope so. That opportunity comes up, I would love to take advantage of it.
Awesome. Well, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit too. That when we were just starting before the interview, you mentioned working with a coach right now.
Mhm.
So tell me about that. When people are in transition, what you're in transition now. What made you decide to hire a coach, and what kind of things are you getting out of the experience of that?
Well, it's probably best to go back to, about a year ago, last summer. I finally had a chance to reconnect with my original mentor in the real estate business, Mary Sullivan, who was one of the top producers with CBRE and then HFF here in Denver for years. And she, I think, retired in 2018, but did billions of dollars of transactions of office buildings and retail centers, and a petite woman, in stature, but had a heart of gold. And I reconnected with her, and we went to lunch, and she said, you are so talented. You understand this business. Because I was asking her about maybe making a change to do something else. And she said, what else would you do? This is your passion. This is what you're good at. You've learned it over what, 25 plus years. You've gotten an extended education in it. And she said, just trust yourself. You can make this happen. And, hire a coach if you need to, or go ahead and spend time following up with all these women that you've helped over the years to say, can you give me any ideas of who I might speak to, or connect me with someone through LinkedIn? And, there are all the things that I knew, but just hearing it from someone that I, held in such high esteem, just the light bulb went over my head. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, of course, I should be doing this and I can do it.
Yeah,
And
so
I
it
think
really
working
re-energized you, huh?
right, and working with this, I interviewed several, and this coach, I like her. I actually heard her speak at a function, and I liked her style. And we're about the same age. I think that's probably part of it. She came from the oil and gas industry, and another male dominated business. And we, talked about that a little bit. And then I outlined for her so much of what I'd already done. And I said, what I need now is for you just to help me hone in on these final aspects of what I want to do going forward. And she coined a phrase for me. She said, you know what, listening to your career, you're in your seventh inning of a ninth inning game now. And it's the top of the seventh, and you're stretching and you're growing and you're expanding. And now we just got to get you focused on what you want to do for the next several years, so that you go out on top and you go out doing what you enjoy doing for a living. So that's been her greatest, I think, advice to me, is just to keep me focused.
Well, yeah, and it sounds like both the mentor and your coach, uh, kind of reinforced what you've already done, and then took maybe some of that doubt away about, well, what should I stay in this? Should I move on? Which sometimes when you have doubt, it's hard to trust that inner self, right? But they kind of refocus you back on, no, trust yourself, and you got this, and go for it, right?
Yes, yes, I would agree. And it meant more coming from women that, had experienced this at their own point sometime during their career, if not more than one time. And, not that I don't work with a lot of good, strong, important men, but sometimes you just want to hear this from another woman that knows where you've been and can appreciate the hardships and will still be there to give you support and lift you up.
Yeah, that camaraderie is needed. I think
Hmm.
men kind of forget or don't even recognize the fact that they have camaraderie all the time. And
Right.
it's just different. The gender does come into play.
Yes.
Well, Tamara, I'm so excited for you and what's next for you. Do you have any new leads that you're working on, or how is your free agency going?
Well, I've actually noticed that since about August, well, probably mid July, more people are adjusting to the work from home. And no one wants to be totally afraid of the pandemic, but we're all cautious, of course. But more people are agreeable to meeting me for coffee. And, we meet with our masks on and sit and chat at the table, then we can take them off. And I think they have been as glad that I've reached out to them as I have been just to meet them face to face. And, get out into the world and our beautiful city and get around. And I have found that most people are very, while we're cautious, they're still optimistic about, we will get through this. Things
Yeah.
will be better. There are industries that are still just going gangbusters. And as I said, it's the e-commerce and any industrial related property type. And the residential market is just off the charts because people are realizing I don't have to live right across the street from where I work. And I can live in, Evergreen and work. And my company may be in downtown Denver. So I'm glad to see that spark of energy because I think it's going to spill over into other industries as well. The tourism, the restaurant business, probably people buying more cars, who knows? But I'm glad to see that a lot of people have looked for silver linings in this pandemic and not been such naysayers. Now, we weren't hit as hard as obviously New York was, or New Jersey, or in Florida, or the West Coast, but I think that says a lot about our Colorado spirit that we're just naturally, and anyone who moves here picks it up once they're here. It's a positive environment in which to live and work.
Yeah, that is true. And there's a lot of resiliency that we've had over the years. You've mentioned all the kind of the recessions, but also the ups and downs. And I remember the oil and gas, but also like you were saying, the the banking industry, the real estate industry, the technology industry. I mean, there's been just a bunch of up and downs, and but we also have quite a bit of diversity here and there. So that's probably working in our
Yes.
favor.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Tamara, I could probably keep chatting with you all afternoon, but maybe that's just you and I need to go out and do a happy hour.
Yes.
So we probably
I
should
would think.
start wrapping up here. If you look back on your career, is there something, a characteristic or a trait or maybe a certain way you operate that you think maybe served you best over the years?
You know, it was very important for me to finish my education, my college education, and I'm glad that I did. It opened up doors and kept me at that level playing field in this industry where I had to have at least the bachelor's degree, if not a master's. And
Uh,
then finishing that MCR, has helped me as a working adult to realize, hey, I can still do it. I can learn and I can achieve. But I'd say that one thing that I've always enjoyed is that I'm a connector of people. I meet someone and I introduce them to someone else, or I stay in touch with people because I think not only could they be a good friend or a business colleague, but I enjoy having people in my life. And I've had several people where I could help them by an introduction or even a job lead. And I've seen that sometimes that can come back to me in different ways, but it's that positivity that I like to exude. I'm not always 100% on top of my game, but when you get up every day, that's a new challenge. It's a gift, and it's really a blessing to just find out a way to make it the best day it can be. And I think I've tried to do that in my career as well.
well, thank you for sharing that. I would definitely concur. You're a connector. When I think about when I was working with you at Western Union and how you connected a group of us to join that women's mentoring circle, so to speak. And
Right.
and then even after some of us left, you kept us connected. And then even after you left, then and then now I think almost all of us in that group have left, but you were kind of the glue that kept us going. So I just want to commend you for your leadership in pulling us together and then keeping us together too, because it's been a treasured group of friends. So thank you.
Yes. And well, yeah, I appreciate you saying that. And they're a great group of women, and that's what we need to do is always support one another, and then you know be there for each other, even if it's just out of the day. I remember that time Kathy and I did this, or Carrie and I did that, or our little get-togethers where we'd have our Christmas celebration and remember we started this lean in circle 5 years ago, and we're still all talking together. That's really special because it doesn't always happen that way.
No, no, because especially in today's environment of corporate, there's so many kind of cutbacks that happen, and then there's big pushes that they bring on, new people, new departments, new initiatives, and then there's cutbacks. And so yeah, it's hard to get connected sometimes because you're just going in so many different directions. But you definitely take the time for that. So keeping on with that. It does
Thank
make a
you.
difference. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. And I really appreciate your time today. This has been kind of nice to just reflect back on how I got here.
How you got here and that you still want to be here and that you're in the right place. It's just now finding that next new role. And
Yes, that's true.
and it sounds like there's going to be some really interesting times and innovation ahead in your industry. So I can't wait to chat with you to see where you land and how you're going to be kind of shaping the new landscape for commercial real estate. So thank you for sharing your story.
Oh, thank you, Kathy. Take care.
And listeners, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please subscribe below and you will be alerted as other interviews are published. And if you have any questions for me or for Tamara, or want to get in touch with Tamara because you need her in your organization, you can find me and her on my website, lifestorycurator.com. And you can post questions there. Or like I said, if you want to get in touch with Tamara, that'd be a great place. I'll make sure to send on that connection. So on that note, listeners, have a great day, stay safe, and stay well. Thank you.